Welcome to the 707, a weekly half-hour program produced by KRCB. The 707 features voices and stories from your community, stories that inspire, stories that make you laugh and sometimes cry, and stories that show how we are connected to each other. I'm your host, Michelle Marquis. In our first episode of the 707, we listened to the youth of Sonoma County as they tell their own stories via podcasting, like 7th grader Tiger Lily and her podcast about the school cat, Sasha.
And that's when I saw him. Sasha, the cat of my dreams.
And 17-year-old Kyle Bradford, who tells the story of dementia in his family.
We'll be discussing the effects on family when one of their loved ones suffers from dementia or Alzheimer's.
One of the ways young people learn about podcasting and try it out for themselves is through the annual NPR Student Podcast Challenge.
Yeah, I'm Steve Drummond. I'm an editor at NPR on the education team, and I work with Janet on the Student Podcast Challenge.
Hi, my name is Janet Woojeung. I'm a producer on NPR's education team, and I run the Student Podcast Challenge and work with Steve.
We started this back in 2018. As you recall, Michelle, that was the time of the Parkland shooting, the tragic school shooting in Florida. And coming out of that, many of those students had kind of become advocates and began speaking out about the gun violence that had happened in their school. And during that time, our team on the education desk, we were kind of trying to figure out how to bring some of those youth voices to the forefront. And we came up with the idea of the Student Podcast Challenge. We started off that year not knowing whether we would get, 50 or 500 entries. We ended up getting 5,500 podcasts from all 50 states and the District of Columbia. And we heard wonderful stories from kids all over the country from a wide range of backgrounds and experiences. And we kind of realized, hey, we were onto something here. And so over the last few years, we've tried to build it and grow it. We put all kinds of materials online. We added 4th graders last year. We've created a college competition for college students because we heard from a lot of people saying, hey, what about us? So it's been a lot of fun to watch it sort of grow and develop.
I think now Steve and I are a little more focused on working with and building a community with some of these teachers and schools who keep coming back to us and keep us in mind as they're creating their curriculum for the spring and winter semester as a part of their class to make a podcast as like a final project or a side assignment and submit it to us. And, this is teachers in like all different kind of areas or sometimes librarians with the podcast club.
Have you been surprised about the quality of podcasts that you get?
Definitely. Really, really surprised. And I think every year Steve and I are surprised by them getting better, especially like when we first started. There were a number of students who were new to podcasting or kind of listening to it in class for the first time, figuring out what an audio story sounds like. Now we're getting a lot of entries from students who grew up listening to podcasts as a main source of news or have a daily habit of consuming podcasts. So a lot of students, first of all, sound really comfortable on mic. And I think the editing quality has also gotten really better. And maybe because we post and share our grand prize winners and finalists every year, but I think students also really stepped up their writing game and storytelling. Yeah.
The thing that stands out to me, and I used to be a middle school teacher, is listening to the younger students. They don't know the rules, and so they feel perfectly free to break them. We get so much energy and excitement, and sometimes they're really funny and they're a little offbeat, and sometimes they fail at it. The high school students, we find they're a little more self-conscious. They're a little less willing to sort of bust out of the mold. Their podcast tends to be, of course, you'd expect a little better written, a little more deeply reported. They maybe have some smattering of journalism, and we get really compelling, personal, thoughtful stories from them. But the energy and the enthusiasm and the excitement that the younger students bring is, for me, a particular favorite.
Have you heard from educators about what they think of this challenge?
Yeah. As this sort of work of trying to connect with more teachers, every year as part of the grand prize, we get to visit the winning student, and many times we get to meet their teacher. Over the years, we met several teachers who personally became really invested in creating a podcasting curriculum or incorporating it in their classes. I think that's been a really, really, really inspiring part of it. And we learn from them too all the time about what kind of materials they're using, what kind of activities or even games they're playing with their students to engage them and teach them how to do this. So yeah, we really appreciate those who've taken it to the next level.
I'll mention a couple. In the very first year, I talk about it all the time. There was a student, a fifth grader, who did a wonderful podcast about tater tots, and he interviewed his fellow classmates as to whether they were pro tater tots or anti tater tots. He called up Ore-Ida, the maker of tater tots, and got a spokesperson on the phone and did a lovely interview. Anyway, we all just totally enjoyed it. We had a student who explored the water crisis, a high school student who explored the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. She told us she had never even heard a podcast before she ever made one. And she produced this wonderfully, solid piece of journalism about what was going on with the water in her school.
Do you ever hire any of these kids?
Yes, we have. I'm so glad you asked that. The first year we had a college competition. A woman named Anya Steinberg, she was at Colorado College, I think, won the competition, and she became an intern on our team, and now she works for the Throughline podcast at NPR. So that's one of our few success stories, although I just heard the other day from a student in Detroit who did a podcast about mariachi music in the city, and he just got an internship at our public radio station, WDET, in Detroit.
That's awesome. Okay, I do want to ask you, because we had a finalist in the high school category from Santa Rosa High School last year. His name is Kyle Bradford, and he did a podcast called Forgetting Family about dementia in his family. Did you listen to this one, and your thoughts on it?
I remember this one, and I think when I saw that we were going to be talking about it, I immediately remembered it was about, his family and dementia running in his family.
He slowed down, and I had to speed up.
That was my grandma on my mom's side, who was talking about my grandpa, who had a very slow deterioration into dementia that I didn't realize until much later.
It was really special hearing from a young person's perspective of how he was processing all of this, like in his life, connecting with older family members, and then losing parts of that, and how that's like hitting him as he's like also getting older.
That was Steve Drummond and Janet Woojeung Lee from NPR's Student Podcast Challenge. Coming up next on the 707, we'll talk with Kyle Bradford's teacher at Santa Rosa High School and learn about why she includes the art of the podcast in her curriculum.
KRCB is Sonoma County's NPR station, featuring the voices, sounds, and culture that make our home unique. From the heartwarming tales of postcards,
our grandmother was the founder of Juneteenth in Sonoma County,
to the Arts Briefs series shining a spotlight on the incredible youth in the arts scene.
Mariachi can express everything that you feel.
And farm tales.
We live in this beautiful area that allows all forms of success in agriculture.
Your stories, your station. KRCB 104.9, Sonoma County's NPR station.
Welcome back to the 707. I'm your host, Michelle Marquis, and in this episode, we are exploring the ways young people are using podcasts to tell their own stories. I called Hollis Fennen, an English teacher at Santa Rosa High School, whose student, Kyle Bradford, was a finalist in the 2024 NPR Student Podcast Challenge.
So I just really wanted to study the art of podcasting. What captivates listeners, what motivates podcasters to create stories for people to listen to.
Fennen has been using podcasts as a teaching tool for years. She's passionate about the power of audio storytelling and how it can engage students in a whole new way.
We listen to several podcasts over the course of a few days, kind of a week, and we listen to introductions, why they're engaging, how it piques interest in the reader, what pulls the listener through an episode. There are a lot of ways to do it right. It just has to be something you're interested in telling.
But Fennen says the real magic happens when her students create their own podcasts.
They know how much what they say and write matters to other people. And they have a lot of self-doubt. I can't write that well. Why would people want to listen to me? What do I have to say? And then they create something, and people read their words and tear up, and we hear their words, and we're incredibly moved. And that is such a powerful experience for students.
Fennen's students learn valuable skills beyond just English composition. They develop confidence, learn to be vulnerable, and discover the power of their own voices.
It's empowering to be vulnerable, and students don't necessarily believe me at first, but when you see it happen in real time and you see the support and validation and appreciation and gratitude that the rest of the class shows you after a moment of vulnerability, that sticks with you.
I asked Fennen how many of her students enter the NPR Student Podcast Challenge.
Actually, last year was the very first year that only two of my students entered, and Kyle became a finalist. We were just so excited.
Kyle's finalist entry was very personal.
His podcast is just about the struggle that his family has experienced dealing with mental decline, dementia on both sides of his family. And now that he's older, he's becoming more aware of what that process was. And also going forward, how do people face the reality that this could be in their future? It was just a really personal story.
Long past his diagnosis, I had an experience with him where he mistaked me for someone who I was not while I was trying to get back into the house, and he chased me and was yelling at me thinking that I was an intruder, which was a significant moment to me that showed that this was serious and that there was something wrong with my grandpa.
I really appreciate how vulnerable the piece that Kyle did, and you mentioned that some of your other students chose things that were really vulnerable, and I think that's such an important skill to be able to have. World can be pretty scary and it can be really aggressive, and to be able to be vulnerable and open yourself up and talk about problems, and that's such an important skill to have.
It really is, and I try to be super respectful about it. I often know that students are dealing with things before anybody else does or before they're comfortable sharing, and I don't require anyone to share things that are personal. But we also talk about the fact that if we're going to be vulnerable, our class is the place to start.
Fennen's approach to podcasting is a testament to the power of creative learning. It's a reminder that education can be engaging, inspiring, and deeply personal, and that young people should be empowered to tell their stories. This is the 707 on KRCB. We'll be right back.
KRCB is Sonoma County's NPR station. Wondering what makes us stand out? It's simple: our unwavering commitment to this community. Morning Music, hosted by Brian Griffith, sets the perfect tone for your day.
Brian here with you on Sonoma County's NPR station.
As the sun climbs high, join Doug Jane for Midday Music.
Doug Jane with you. Thanks for tuning in.
It's the soundtrack of Sonoma County. Then, stay informed with All Things Considered, featuring insightful reporting from the KRCB newsroom, ensuring you're always in the loop.
For Manzana, the company that helped keep Sebastopol's famous Gravenstein apple alive, their 103rd year in business will be their last.
Your home for the best in local news and music. Because when the community sings, we're here to listen. Your radio, your stories, your station. KRCB 104.9, Sonoma County's NPR station.
Welcome back to the 707. Since March 2023, KRCB has hosted youth podcasting workshops to teach kids how to tell audio stories. We've hosted many workshops with our journalists and sound engineers to show young people how to conduct an interview, how to use a microphone and a recorder, how to use sound editing software, and all of the other elements that come together to make a compelling podcast. Here's a clip from our most recent workshop where students asked people at the Central Library in downtown Santa Rosa about their favorite tastes.
The spicy and savory.
Savory and sour.
I guess it will be sweet.
It hurts the most if I do too much spicy.
I would prefer savory.
So, do you prefer sweet, sour, savory, or salty?
And here's another clip from 7th grader Tiger Lily and her podcast about the school cat, Sasha.
Today I am interviewing somebody about Sasha the cat.
I am Deborah LaPreth. I'm the assistant principal at Santa Rosa Middle School. And although Sasha the cat isn't my cat, he has been here for around 3 years, and I pretty much adopted him here on campus.
How long have you worked here?
This is my 32nd year at Santa Rosa Middle School, but my first year as assistant principal.
Wow, that's a long time.
Forever.
Join me in the studio as I chat with one of my colleagues who has worked on KRCB's youth podcasting workshops. With me is Max Allen. He is the associate radio producer here at KRCB. Hi, Max.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. I wanted to ask you because you've had a chance to work on KRCB's youth podcast workshops. So how did we get into hosting these workshops?
Well, I'll have to give the credit to our radio manager, Catherine. She found inspiration from the NPR Podcast Challenge and really saw an opportunity with that and the Sonoma County Library and the E Street studios they have and how well they are equipped for media production. And from there, she encouraged us to dive right in, and that's how we started.
Nice. Yeah. So what is it like? How do you work with kids on teaching them how to podcast?
It's a little overwhelming, to be honest. The times that I've done it, it's been with a partner. The first time was Ryan Miller, and then the second time was Lauren Spates. Mm-hmm. And they really built the curriculum and put thought into what we were going to be talking about each day. I really enjoyed just kind of telling the kids, okay, open up this box, see what's in there, see what you can plug in and turn it on, and then ask me questions and we'll go from there.
Right. So getting them familiar with equipment.
Yeah. The most important questions are ones that you come up with yourself, not necessarily answers you're told or like, right. I just find the most interesting questions come from experience and them actually starting to mess around.
Do kids tend to pick up on that technology pretty quickly?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you worked with Tiger Lily. We've played a couple of clips here during the 707 from her podcast, which I'm so enchanted with. It's very, very fun. So what was it like working with her?
It was great. She, unlike some of the other students, had a very strong vision of what she wanted and how she was going to do it and what it was going to be like. So she was pretty easy to work with. Just a little bit of guidance here and there. She learned a lot of skills from Ryan about interviewing tactics.
Were you helping with any editing or was that?
Yeah, so she did all the recording herself. Mm-hmm. She would take a recorder out into the field to take it to school that day and do recordings. And then we sat down together and put it all into GarageBand and made the final piece, just sitting down next to each other in the E Street studios at the Santa Rosa Library.
Very nice, yeah. So she had a full vision of how she wanted to tell her story in the podcast.
Yeah, and she even knew what song she wanted. Everybody wants to be a cat. It's got to be in there.
Right?
So, yeah, she had a very strong vision of what she wanted.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to hosting these again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always interesting and always different.
All kids are different, right?
Yeah.
Right on. Thank you so much, Max.
Of course, my pleasure.
That's it for now, folks. You've heard the stories, the famous story of Sasha the school cat.
Everybody wants to be a cat, because a cat's the only cat who knows where it's at. Tell me, everybody's picking up on that.
In the final segment of today's show, we'll look at the Sonoma County Library's sound studios and get you started on your own podcasting adventure. This is the 707 on KRCB.
I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News with a little something to kickstart your mornings. Sonoma First News is a weekday morning podcast with the top local stories and weather updates from across Sonoma County. From Petaluma to Bodega Bay, Sonoma First News has you covered. Subscribe now through KRCB's website, on the NorCal mobile app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sonoma First News from Sonoma County's NPR station, KRCB FM.
This is the 707 on KRCB. In our final segment today, let's head to downtown Santa Rosa.
I am Jessica Hoover, the manager for the Central Santa Rosa Library and Sonoma County History and Genealogy Library. We are really excited to host the E Street Studios here at the Central Santa Rosa Library at 211 E Street. And the sound studio is a recording booth that's big enough for about 1 to 3 people. We have 2 sound studios that can be reserved. One is a bigger studio that includes an electronic piano keyboard, but both studios have GarageBand, Logic Pro audio recording software, and a variety of microphones for all kinds of recording projects.
Very cool. What kinds of projects are people creating in the E Street Studios?
There's many different ways to tell stories, and it's great to hear patrons tell us about what they're working on. Some of the projects that people have shared are recording audio tracks for songs or doing sound mixing. Some people have brought instruments and done a 3-person jam session with instruments and recorded audio tracks. And some people work on podcasts.
The library also has a sound studio in Rincon Valley. Can you tell me about that one?
Yeah, so the Rincon Valley Library has a sound studio called Montecito Studio, and it is exactly like one of the studios here at the Central Library in that it is equipped with video and sound editing software.
So it seems sort of counterintuitive to invite people to come in and make noises in the library. Have you had to tell people to keep it down in there?
The sound studios are mostly soundproof, so the lining in the booth really works great.
And what if you don't know how to use the equipment? Do you train people?
Of course, being a maker is a learning process, and sometimes the journey of learning how to use the equipment is part of the story. So we have on Mondays at the Central Library at the E Street Studios, we have a Sound Studio Basics class. And at Rincon Valley at the Montecito Studios on Thursday mornings. And that is where interested people can make a reservation for that, and staff can give a tutorial or an overview of the equipment that's in the studio and how to use it.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle, and thanks for all you do with the podcasting workshops and KRCB.
No worries. I'm just telling the story about doing it. I haven't actually gone to teach any of them, but I think it would be fun. So I might have to weasel my way in there one time.
Yes.
Right on. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.
That was Jessica Hoover, branch manager at the Central Santa Rosa Library. Besides the resources at the Sonoma County Library, you can also use things that are close at hand to start your podcasting journey. Many of Hollis Fennen students used apps on their phones to record interviews, and there are free audio editing programs available to download, like Audio Director, WavePad, GarageBand, and others. CreativeCommons.org is a good website for free music tracks. If you have a student who wants to learn more, sign them up for our next KRCB Youth Podcast Workshop. And the 2025 NPR Student Podcast Challenge deadline for kids in grades 4 through 12 is May 2nd. You can find links for everything I've mentioned, as well as a podcast of today's show on our website at krcb.org/the707. I'm your host and producer of this program, Michelle Marquis. The 707 is a service of NorCal Public Media. Our president and CEO is Darren Lachelle.